flung to these extremes. And the more extreme people became in their political thought, the less logical they grew. And the more I learned about libertarianism, the more it seemed to make total sense with what I believed.
Well, talk a little bit about, you know, how have your libertarian beliefs been received, you know, both, you know, at MTV and then beyond? Are they more palatable to a wider range of people, or are they more disturbing to more people?
Well, I think in the late 90s especially, it was really, you're either a conservative or a liberal. You're a Republican or you're a Democrat, and people were very happy to pigeonhole you. And so, you know, there was no ad hoc argument for what people had already defined you as. They would not accept that. So, you know, no one would have entertained a libertarian notion unless I had just left and moved to Montana in a survivalist compound. Right. I think, you know, that might have made them look at things a little bit differently. And I found on the West Coast, it's really great because people are politically engaged in a different way, and there's a different spirit. And I felt like my parents always embodied that, because my parents left the comfort of a corporate law job. My dad's a lawyer in Indianapolis, and wanted to move somewhere beautiful and start a new life, and they didn't have any friends. And my dad got a job in Portland. They had visited there and literally drove the family out in our station wagon. And it always gave me this sense that, you know, life is an adventure, and there's something out there for you to create. You just have to have the spine and the desire to do it.
So would you say that you had always been a libertarian, but you didn't know that there was such a thing?
Yeah, I didn't really, I mean, I didn't have a word for it. I didn't have a frame of reference for the way my beliefs coalesce. And I didn't know that there were other people out there who felt the same way. And it was funny because I was at that Young Eagles event and talking about various things, and the subject of drug legalization came up. And I always thought, like, drugs are bad, okay? And then a college student with a Cato pen came up to me, and he was like, no, actually there's a really great argument for legalizing drugs. And, you know, my ears sort of pricked up. I said, oh, tell me more, good man, because I just thought that heroin and all these things were so yucky and dirty smelly people did those drugs.
And you will
which is still true.
You will be selling heroin outside later, right?
Yeah, I've got a kiosk. The hotel has been gracious enough to give me some real estate.
So that helped open up, you know, the idea that there's a third or fourth or fifth position out there.
Yeah.
What you talked a little bit about before about where your beliefs come from. How you know, do you think that libertarian beliefs, is it an impulse that you're born with, or is it something born out of experience, or where does it come from?
It's really funny because people who aren't libertarians, who don't understand it, are so quick to quantify it. And so I've been having this war all week with atheists, lefty atheists on Facebook, because I had the audacity to say on Bill Maher last week that atheism is a religion, and I believe that it is. And I will accept that I'm using that term in a colloquial, intuitive sense, that, you know, it is not epistemologically a religion. But the way that religious people express themselves in this country, really not that different from the way atheists express themselves in this country. And they're more than happy to squash down your beliefs and get very defensive very quickly. And so one guy wrote, libertarianism is just an adolescent fantasy. It's like square wheels on a car. And I was like, no, it's actually not. It's actually the logical progression of an open mind, and if you take it to its fullest, it would actually be the most productive and beneficial.
I was, some of you will remember last year I was on Real Time with Bill Maher as well, and I was happy in the wake of Kennedy's appearance on Twitter. Somebody wrote, Kennedy is the worst guest on Bill Maher since Nick Gillespie. That works for me.
Yeah.
Now, you were saying that, you know, partly going also to the idea of experience and a kind of do-it-yourself culture. Your husband, Dave, was a professional, or is a professional snowboarder, and then he came from a kind of like non-political but hippie-ish culture in the Pacific Northwest, but then when he started his own business, he suddenly started getting more interested in libertarian ideas.
Yeah, and he, it's been really interesting watching his progress, and I can't speak for him, but he is so much more enthralled with the political process now, and he's definitely a libertarian because he owns a small business in Southern California. They make snowboards. And it's not that it's a bad place to make snowboards. California's silly with mountains, but it's a really tough place to be in manufacturing. It's a really hostile state to have a manufacturing business and a small business. And so that's what he's found, is that he really wants the government to get out of the way, because they certainly have been no help. I mean, the Small Business Administration, all that nonsense that, you know, and I talked about the figurehead douchebags on Bill Maher, and it doesn't really matter what party, but they all spout these platitudes about small business is the backbone of this country. It's like, yeah, but you're doing everything you can by raising taxes and forcing people to insure their employees, regardless of whether or not their employees can insure themselves. And it's very unrealistic. It is the only word I can used to describe it is hostile, but he still perseveres. And you know, I talk to a lot of people on talk radio in LA, and whenever the subject comes up about people who own their own businesses, they want to leave. They want to go to Nevada, they want to go to Washington State, where there is a more amenable climate to people who want to live the American dream.
Well, you also, in previous conversations, you've touched the third rail of libertarian politics, which is parenting.
Yeah.
And you have apparently come up with, you know, a lot of libertarians. And when I started at Reason in 1993, my child was the first person born in the kind of Reason staff orbit in about 10 or 15 years. And it had seemed to be that to be a libertarian, you had to eschew any possibility of reproduction, even if you were a man who had occasional access to women. It seemed to be very anti-children. And you know, but libertarian parenting, I've had more than, and I'm sure everybody in this room has had some kind of conversation where a couple of years ago I met Charles Krauthammer, and you always get these stories of like, I was a libertarian until ... and Krauthammer said, you know, I was a libertarian, which that was the first lie of the conversation. But you know, until I had a daughter. And as if you can't be a parent and a libertarian. But what is your take on libertarian parenting?
Well, my take is, you know, it's from a mom's perspective, and I have 2 daughters, you know, and I look around, and groupthink starts in preschool. You know, it's not something that happens in college or later. And it's really important for me to teach my girls that, you know, you have to be kind, you have to be inclusive, you have to respect other people, but, you know, don't allow people to bully you. And so much, when you have beliefs that are not held by a vast majority of people, they will try and bully you. They will, because if they don't understand you, they will criticize you. And it's not by trying to bring you into their camp, it's just because you are the other, you are different. And you really have to stand up for yourself. And, you know, I want them to express their individuality. I want them to be autonomous. And I want them to be confident. And, you know, I want them to be able to go out and not feel that they have to spend $900 on a handbag because, you know.
Because that's taking money away from you.
I want to be able to spend $900 on a handbag, but, you know, I want them to.
We should point out that your children are 3 and 6, your daughters, so all of the hard work is still ahead. I look
around and I see young women in my neighborhood, and they've got miniskirts and Ugg boots, and which is just, it's a bad look. It's not attractive. You know, I think an aesthetic is really important, and you have to value yourself. But I'm also super into survivalism, and you know, I want my girls to be able to walk home and always have treats and know that they have to have water, and you know, it's like moms are the pocketbook survivalists. By the way, it's like all we see on Discovery Channel is these hulking men in hemp vests, you know, out there fashioning rafts out of snakeskin. But it's like, moms are the real survivalists. And I realize this the more and more as we go along, because if you ask any woman to empty out her purse right now, she would be able to keep most of the room alive in breath mints and lip gloss for 2 weeks. But moms can MacGyver their way out of just about anything.
Sure. Now, you told me once that you were, this was some years ago, before your rise to What, you were on MTV? I'm forgetting now for a second. But your first internship in LA, you were denied after you were accepted because you were a Republican. This was would that happen now, or do you think is libertarianism on the rise among younger people or among older people, or does it seem to you to have, over the past 20 years, is it more of a recognizable position, and if so, why is that? Is it a good thing?
It's much more of a recognizable position. And I think part of that is due to the economy and people realizing that the right-left paradigm isn't going to bring back jobs. It's not going to get the economy going, and certainly not big government. We've seen so many big government administrations, one after the other, and it just doesn't work. So finally, people are doing a couple things. They're going issue by issue because that's just the way people are informing themselves, and I think that's a really good advent of talk radio. And talk radio really takes a drubbing. What it allows people to do is learn about things, because Adrian Moore was on my radio show, and we talked about high-speed rail and how ridiculous it is, and how Californians, and I don't understand this, they approved this bond measure for $9 million, and now the cost is going to be $90 billion. And did you really think the math was going to add up, number one? And in a state where we are just screwed, blued, and tattooed in every imaginable sense, we really need to be spending $99 billion on high-speed rail with all the problems we got? I mean, we got 99 problems.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, why don't we open it up for some questions, and let's.
And Ron Paul also has.
Wait, 99 billion for Ron Paul?
No, he's not a problem. But Ron Paul, like my mom and I, this is a really good example. My mom is an avowed Democrat. She will volunteer for every Democratic candidate. She works the polls. She's all over the place, and she loved Bill Clinton. My grandmother, God rest her soul, but she had a signed picture of Bill Clinton in her house, and she's like, "Oh, that Monica Lewinsky, she is such a slut. What she did to him, it's awful." And I'm thinking like, Mima, how much did you have to pay for that picture? Like, how many Social Security checks did it take for her to afford that? But
but now your mother is a Ron Paul.
Yeah, my mom is the super. But we agree on a lot of Ron Paul stuff, because my mom hates corporations, and she doesn't like wars, and she doesn't like big government. So this Ron Paul character is really starting to sound like a rational approach to these modern political crises.
All right. Well, thank you, Kennedy. Let's have some questions.
Thanks very much. That was great, both of you. Now that Dan Quayle is a card-carrying member of the AARP, who is your current crush on, or more seriously?
I'm so glad you asked. That's a very valid question, and the answer is Mitt Romney's sons.
So you want them to be your brother wives?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
So turnabout is fair play.
Are there political figures out there that you admire who you'd like to see go places?
I really do like Gary Johnson, and I was fortunate enough to meet Governor Johnson at a Reason event, and I have so much respect for what he's done in New Mexico, and I was surprised how he was marginalized in the Republican debates. And Gary and I are both triathletes, and we both have celiac disease. So there's not just the legalizing marijuana.
So it's the narcissism that draws you closer to just like you.
Nick, you say that, but my humility is probably my greatest attribute.